Well, hello, everybody. Welcome into another Mind Your Business podcast, a presentation of the Boone Area Chamber of Commerce, brought to you each week by our friends at Appalachian Commercial Real Estate and UNC Health Appalachian. It's going to take a minute to get used to saying that. But I tell you who it won't take a minute getting used to talking to, and that is our guest this week, Lucas Underwood from L&N Performance Automotive here in the High Country. You'll know them as that automotive shop right in between Tweetsie Railroad and Mystery Hill. We're going to get some questions answered about how that business has grown over time, because I know if you're like me, you've seen it in all these times as you've driven by that area. But in addition to running a very successful business here in the High Country, Lucas is involved in helping shape the trades industry on the automotive side of things around the country. And we'll get into that conversation a little bit more as we think about this concept of training the trades. And Lucas, first of all, welcome into the program. It's great to finally link up with you in this way.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here, David.
Well, but before we start talking too much about how you are training the staff that you work with and help others to do the same, I think it'd be great to just get a little bit of a history lesson first on the shop. What led you to start this business here in the High Country? And obviously you guys have grown quite a bit here in the very recent term.
Absolutely. So, I'd been in my family business for years and years and years. Mom and dad have owned Mystery Hill. They took it over from my dad's father. And I grew up in that business, lived here my entire life. And, as they say, kind of reinventing the wheel, right? Like I was the son that didn't think dad was doing it the right way. I look back all these years later and say, man, he was a lot smarter than I thought he was. And so I would love diesel trucks. And at the time, a good friend of mine suggested that I start a shop. We were selling diesel parts, and she said, hey, look, I think you ought to start a shop. You ought to do this. And we had found that nobody was in the area installing those performance parts on the trucks that we were selling. So we started there, and we started installing those parts. As things developed with the business, I saw a weakness in our community in some way, that there wasn't anybody who could handle the advanced testing or the advanced diagnostics on the diesel trucks or even the automobiles. And so I decided that I was going to develop that skill to be able to fix and test the things that others, maybe they didn't want to work on that particular model or something that complex. And so I developed a skill in that area. As things progressed, right, 2011, I had a little girl. And by 2015, I walked in one night to my wife and I said, I'm not doing this anymore. And she said, what do you mean? I said, I'm not making any money. This is super stressful. I'm not being the dad I want to be. I'm not being the husband I want to be. And she said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to train to be the best technician I can be. I'm going to go get a job somewhere. And she said, well, it's really funny you said that. And she held up this postcard for a local event in Cary, North Carolina. I went to that event and really quickly learned that I didn't know how to run a business. I thought I did, and I thought that the job of fixing cars was running an auto repair business. And so I go to this class, and the first thing they said was that client service doesn't have anything to do with how you feel about the clients. And so it was an eye-opener for me. And the next class, a gentleman says, listen, I know you don't feel like you have the time or the money to be here, but I promise there's a better way to do this. Many of you are trying to reinvent the wheel. If you'll sit here and listen to me for 10 minutes, I can show you a better way to run your business. And from that point on, we've been on a growth trajectory that is just phenomenal. And a lot of that is because we have a good team in place. And so, we started in 2007. We stayed in that 3-bay barn up there right next to Mystery Hill. And just this November, we opened a 10-bay facility. It is air conditioned. It's heated. It has the biggest and most advanced lifts and testing equipment available in the High Country in that facility. So it's a really neat opportunity to serve our community. But we've also grown in other ways, right? So I'm hosting a podcast, Changing the Industry podcast, which is just for automotive shops, technicians, service advisors, shop owners. I'm part of a 501c3 that looks to improve and help the automotive industry across the board. I'm also a board member for ASTA, the Automotive Service and Tire Alliance here in North Carolina, and the AASP, or Automotive Service Professionals Board. I'm their vice president of the national organization here.
I think that part of it is so intriguing, because you've immediately taken what you've learned and applied that to helping others. And we're going to talk about that more here in just a moment. But I want to go back to something that you were talking about before, and going to that class and kind of going under the hood, so to speak, pun
Yeah,
intended, of course, to find out that there were things about running your business that you could do more efficiently, you could do differently. When you brought that knowledge back, because I'm sure that there are some that are listening to this that are like,
yeah,
I don't do something in the automotive world. I do a thing over here, but it's all about trying to figure out a way to make the business side
yeah,
work versus just doing the thing or making the thing.
absolutely.
What were those two or three things maybe that you brought back immediately that were just those game changing, eye opening moments that all of a sudden made your business a business and not the
Absolutely.
paperwork behind doing the work that you were doing?
So there were a lot of things, right? But probably the biggest thing for me is that there was a quote that was brought up from the E Myth written by Michael Gerber, and he's talking to a lady who owns a bakery, and she said, "For gosh sakes, I just want to bake cupcakes." And he said, "If you want to bake cupcakes, for God's sakes, go to get a job somewhere baking cupcakes, because the job of business owner is not baking cupcakes. It's not what the business does. Your job is to manage and grow a business which bakes cupcakes. They're not the same jobs. Recognize the difference in the two jobs." And so one of the big things that I learned coming back is what is the business's potential? I learned that I wasn't alone. I learned that there are other people doing business just like I am, and they have systems, processes, policies, and procedures laid out that work. And all too often, when we're in our business, we're out putting out those fires. We're too busy dealing with the problems that are in the business. But what we never see, David, is that those problems don't go away if we don't develop a strategy that doesn't invite the problems. So we can be out here all day long dealing with that client on the phone, dealing with the problem with the employee, fixing the problem in the business. But a lot of times it's our process, it's our system that developed the problem to begin with. And so if we can come up with a system that eliminates part of those problems, we can gain that time back that allows us to go back to running the business. And I tell people all the time, it's one thing to say that I'm a business owner, but the reality of it is can you steer a ship from the engine room? No, you can't see where you're going. And so if you're down in the engine room doing the work that the business does, you're going to have a hard time having that 30,000-foot view of where your business is right now and the trajectory that you want it to be on. Jim Fannin, known as a goal coach, right? There's tons of videos on YouTube about him. He said something that's always spoken to me, and I remember it very, very often. He said, a true champion doesn't go from A to B in their mind when they have a plan for their business. He said they go to B and they chronologically illuminate a path back to A so they can pinpoint where it is they want to be. And that means that we've got to know where we're going. We have to have a destination. We have to know what our potential is. And I think that's the biggest thing I learned about my business is I had way more potential than I ever realized I had. Nobody had ever shared it with me though. So I think that's the biggest one.
So you just outlined a moment ago that you grew to a 10 bay shop from
Hmm.
a 3 bay shop.
Yeah.
Immediately, there are people out there that are saying, well, you had to hire some people.
Yeah.
And that means in a very skilled business that you're in, those have to be skilled laborers.
Absolutely.
How have you gone through not only hiring in the short term to satisfy that need, but I also know that you have approached this from more of an industry building way, if you will, and
For sure.
thinking about how you can see the next generation of technicians and the next generation of a highly skilled labor force. So what got you down that road and how you found success there?
Well, we started in a couple different ways here. And the first is that I had always been trying to hire locally. And I found that many of the components of what I needed for this business. When we talk about high-end diagnostic work or high-end testing work, we're not talking about the standard rich wrench turning mechanic of the 1950s, right? We're talking about disassembling computers out of your car that have 5, 10, 15 networks attached to them in some cases, and we're actually deciphering that data. We're connecting to the chipset on the board itself and communicating with that chip and writing hexadecimal data to that chip, right? And so a lot of times when we envision a automotive technician or mechanic, we're not thinking about the fact that this is an extremely skilled, almost electronics engineer level position. And so I started looking outside of the high country to fill some of these positions. Eric, who is our lead technician, came from New York City. And so we built a network and we told people what we were doing and we were open about everything, right? We were super transparent. We said, hey, we're not always doing the best in this area, but we're looking to grow and build the business. And we want people who can be part of this transformation into something bigger and better. And so we reached and approached a whole different demographic of skilled laborers who had been in shops that weren't being treated the way they thought they should be treated. They didn't have the experience that we would want an employee to have, and they said, wow, you're really doing this different. The fact that you're transparent and you're saying this openly on the internet is huge. It gives us an opportunity to kind of see what you're doing and what your heart is in this, if you will. So we hired out of the high country and brought some folks in. Have a guy from Florida, have a guy from New York, just brought a guy in from Raleigh. But that being said, we don't want to stop with folks out of town and not bring those in our community into the shop and grow them and teach them and develop them as well. We have more positions available, so we said, hey, look, let's start looking at apprenticeships, right? We have very skilled technicians here, probably the top 2 to 5% of skill in the entire nation. And I'm not bragging on them; they're just really good at what they do. And I think it's a problem that we're seeing nationwide that they're not able to teach that to the next generation. And David, I think a reason for that is because shops are production machines. And their owners often look at it and say, I've got to get this work done. This consumer needs their vehicle back. This consumer needs this product completed ASAP. I've got to push. I've got to get this done. But the issue that I saw is if we're doing that and we're pushing that hard, there's no chance for them to pass that knowledge down to the next generation. And so we started developing a system where we could bring in apprentices into the shop. They're paid well. They earn really good money. They have benefits. They get tools. They get a free 2-year associated. I can't remember the exact term for it, but it's basically a 2-year degree in the automotive field through Caldwell. Lots of opportunity here to grow. And it's designed and set up to where they can pull and generate knowledge directly from someone with experience that has time to sit there with them and teach them and guide them.
You know, I don't think any of us have the hexadecimal wrench in our toolkit,
Absolutely.
at least right now. But with that, are you finding that as you're getting into a computer age or working even farther down that path? I know the automotive industry has been there for quite some time,
Yeah.
but you're able to use that as a recruiting tool of today's generation, because those kids are growing up with iPads, they're growing up with cell phones, they're content creators more than we ever thought about being at
Right.
our young age. Is it an easier sell now because you can say, hey, you've been messing with these things all your life. Now I'll allow you to do that and work on a car at the same time?
Absolutely. And here's the thing is I think it is if we're taking that opportunity to be in front of them, right? If we're not in front of them, they don't know that. And I had a great experience when we started working with Watauga in the automotive program, because I watched the staff at Watauga High. You know, they got this amazing automotive instructor in there that really knew what he was doing and had a passion for it. And then I watched them begin to understand just how advanced the automotive field is. And then I watched the students pour in because they were so excited about seeing this new technology. You know, I guess it was 5 years ago now that Mary Barra said in the next 10 years we'll see more technology implemented in the automobile than we've seen in the past 100 years. And so we're seeing the effects of that right now. We're seeing cars with 5, 6, 10 networks in them, 150, 160 modules in some cases. Your doors and windows will not work without a computer attached to them telling them what to do. And you know, many of the trades have shied away from that and said, look, I'm not interested in learning something new. I'm not interested in developing this. We've tried to embrace that. We've tried to work with the schools to make sure they're embracing that, because the next generation pulls up the iPad, they pull up the scan tool, and they can look at it and they can comprehend the data that's there. Right. And so just like teaching, you know, your senior parents to use a computer, David, I don't know if you've ever tried that. It's tough. But, you know, when you get into a situation where you give a youngster that new technology, it makes sense to them. And it's easier to train and develop that younger technician on this new technology than it is our previous generations. And so we've got to stop shying away from it. We've got to give them the tools, the training, the opportunities they need to grow in this.
I could never get my dad past the Kansas River on Oregon Trail. I mean, he could just never
We talked about
never
that
do
the
it.
other day, didn't we?
Yeah, yeah. So, if you could give some advice
Mhm.
to a business that has an opportunity like you do, you've talked a lot about apprenticeships, connecting with local education partners, be that
Yeah,
Caldwell Community College, Watauga High School. You've got
of
two
course.
great resources just down the street from you in that regard. But for that business that might not necessarily be automotive, but has similar linkages,
Yeah.
what were the hurdles that you were able to get yourself past that allowed this new renaissance, if you will, of being able to train skilled workers to supplement what you were doing? Was there a point in time that you remember, I just got to get past this thing, or I've got to get past
Yeah.
myself in this way? Could you
Well,
offer any advice to maybe help somebody knock down a similar wall?
absolutely. And the biggest one for me is you have to allow them to make mistakes. As a business owner, we take our client experience very seriously. We all do. And it can be so tough to recognize that a team member made a mistake. And as a business owner, I'm going to tell you something. I've dealt with hundreds and hundreds. I get probably 200 emails a week from auto repair shop owners. And I understand how much we care about the business, but I'm going to tell you something. You will forgive yourself for something that you won't forgive your employee for. You will give yourself a reason that it's okay that you made that mistake. And you often have amnesia when it comes to the same mistake they made that you made years ago. You forgot about it and you understand. I mean, I know it can be embarrassing, especially if you have to tell a client about it. But the reality is this is how we learn and grow. If we don't have an opportunity to make a mistake, then we don't have an opportunity to grow. I'm going to tell you the other thing is that it is really uncomfortable bringing a new young generation into your facility and beginning to teach them. And I'm going to make it extraordinarily clear for you, you will not grow in your comfort zone. You have to get outside of your comfort zone if you're going to grow. And that is one of the big things that I learned is that it was not necessarily comfortable to bring new people in and have them question why I did what I did. It was not comfortable to take them and put them in these training classes. Sometimes I was using the revenue that I needed to keep the business doing what it was doing to make sure they had the training they needed or buying them new tools. Wasn't always comfortable, but I knew that we had to get out of the comfort zone to see the growth that we wanted to see.
I think you also brought up a point a few moments ago about the value of networks within your industry.
Yes.
Can you speak a bit as to why it is that you've gotten involved in some of these associations and what you basically or what you've been able to benefit from the most in talking to others about what it is they do that might be similar to what you do?
I'm going to tell you, one of the toughest things that I experienced was the need to come out and say, I don't know what I'm doing, right? And when I encountered enough information, enough data to recognize that I had unconscious incompetence, right? I didn't have a clue. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to run a business. When I acknowledged that, I recognized that I didn't ever want anybody to feel like I felt in those beginning times of the business. I knew that I wanted to be out telling people there was a better way, sharing it in a way that they would be receptive to it, right? And so I got involved with some Facebook groups, and those groups were shop owners, they were technicians, and I began to share my experience with them. And they started sharing their experiences with me. They weren't always kind about it, right? They weren't always as polished as I would have liked to have seen. But when I got involved with those groups and I got involved with ASTA here in North Carolina, it gave me the ability to see there were multiple different ways to run a business. There were multiple different ways to train people. And it gave me an opportunity to really dig in and look at my business in a different way and begin to implement things that I hadn't even thought about, ideas, strategies, offerings that we didn't offer before. And, in all of that, as I became more involved with it, we started seeing more and more opportunities for training. It's just like the chamber. If you're not taking advantage of the offerings, they can't continue to offer those. They can't continue to bring you training if you don't go to the training. And so we started going to more and more training. They developed more training for us. And that's probably the biggest thing is it gives us an opportunity to train our people at an extremely high level. We're talking about training that manufacturers and dealers don't provide in their dealerships. Right here in North Carolina, we've been slated as the place to train for automotive in the United States today. How cool is that? And it takes us being involved. So that's probably the biggest thing that I got from it.
What do you see if a community were to take a community mindset toward that professional development, whether that's the professional development of the business or the staff of the business or both? In the perfect case, what advances if the entire community buys into that
Oh,
and you're
man.
able to create that expectation that a particular area is a cradle of passing on knowledge, passing on experience, and leading to opportunity? Is that something that you've thought about in the way that you've scaled your business, that if I can just get some people to come along, we could really create something special here in terms of skill development?
Absolutely. And you know, look, here's the deal is one of the big things, a man named Tim Kite, if you ever get a chance, search him up on YouTube. He's got a great leadership video. If you ever get a chance, go watch it. But he says leaders have to be on journeys because they're not going to follow you just anywhere, right? We need to be on a journey. We need to be going somewhere. And so if we're going to talk about growing a community and we want to be this transparent force of knowledge, man, I am going to tell you right now, if you will get out and you will become involved and you get that figurehead of, hey, we're going to have the best training, you know what happens? The best trainers start to come to your community. The best networking comes to your community. You get involved and you realize many of these businesses operate the exact same way. So it doesn't matter if it's automotive, if it's construction, whatever it is. This engagement and this networking, it is unbelievable to see how much a group of people can develop into powerhouse businesses when they will be transparent and communicate, share their struggles, share their fears. You will see explosive growth. And when people are coming to your community and seeking you out because your community is doing amazing things, man, it's such a good feeling. But it gives you opportunity that you never would imagine you'd have.
So 8 years removed from kind of the Renaissance moment that sparked all of this, what does your next 8 years look like?
Uh, so, you know, I've considered multiple locations. I've considered many different things about what we could do with the business. We've considered employee ownership. That's something that's been big on my heart recently, and succession planning. You know, I'm 38, but you know, if we start planning for that right now and what that looks like years down the road, right now we're looking at ways, and it's a tough subject for many, but we're looking at ways, especially in the skilled trades, of how do we take an older team member who's been wrenching their whole life and doing heavy manual labor, where do we take them next? Right? The automotive field's not been real good about providing retirements, and we've not been good about providing medical insurance and vision, dental, things like that. That's things that we do here at the shop, but what position do we have for them as they become a little bit older and they can't do the same tasks they were able to do? Maybe their health goes downhill a little bit. And so those are the directions that I want to take my business right now. And then I want to continue to teach shop owners to do this their way, but a better way, if that makes sense. I don't want anyone to feel the way I felt when I was struggling with the business. So I want to continue to develop this leadership and thought process that we have here in our shop and other shops around the country.
I got to ask you this question before we get to the end of our time together. You know, you've got a business that certainly has been very dynamic. You've talked about being able to get people from outside of the area to come and join you on your team. I'll ask a simple question. Why here? Other than your family tie,
Yeah.
which may have gotten you started, you could have probably taken this thing anywhere. What is it that's kept this growing, very technically savvy business in an area that you know you pull around the corner, sometimes you wouldn't expect to see something so skillfully developed in this particular area all the time?
You know, I'm going to tell you something. I through the podcast and through the things that we've been doing, I've had the opportunity to travel all over the country. And boys, am I always excited to get back home. I love this community, and I love the people in this community. Years and years and years here, I have built a network of friends and family that I know genuinely care about me. They care about the business. They care about our team, and that's important to me. But I'm going to tell you, small town North Carolina, small town America is no different than any other town anywhere else. I see shops like this in small town America everywhere I go, and it's interesting to see that they're well supported by their community. So if we're talking about a technically advanced business, a business that's growing, a business that has opportunity, that is small town USA, right? At the end of the day, it's small town USA. And those members of our community, they're in every single community, David. They are the people who make America what it is. I was thinking about it the other day, and I've made a reel recently about this. The skilled trades built this country. They built this economy. And the economy starts right here in Boone, North Carolina. It starts right here in Blowing Rock, North Carolina. It starts right here in Watauga County. It starts at that level. And if we all just flock to big communities, think of the competition you deal with. Think of the other aspects that you deal with. I would rather serve my community, the people who know and like and trust me, and the people that I know, like, and trust here. Those are the people that I've designed my business to serve, and that's Watauga County.
Very well said. Couldn't have scripted that any better. Last question that I've got for you, and it centers around advice again. We talked a little bit about the business owner that's maybe trying to get things cleaned up as they look for that growth opportunity. But if you could share anything with somebody that's maybe thinking about hanging their own shingle for the first time, or trying to push themselves toward that goal of taking a side hustle and making it mainstream, what would you tell them about starting out, now that you know what you know now after 8-9 years in the business?
I think step number one is go ahead and recognize it's not always going to be easy. B, one of the big things we see in the automotive field is they always say, well, my boss is making all this money. I'd like to go make some of that money myself. You need to understand how a business operates, and that's not how it operates, I promise. Learn how a business operates, whether that's going up here to Caldwell Community College and getting you some business classes, whether that's shadowing another business owner and understanding what it is they do, whether it's reading some books like The E-Myth. I think that's probably one of the greatest books of all time for business owners. How to Win Friends and Influence People is another great one. Lots of different books. Clockwork. I would not dare try and say the man who wrote that book's name. You can forget it, David. I couldn't pronounce it if I tried. I'm a country boy. But you've got to understand that running a business and doing the work that the business does are two separate things. There may be a time when you start your business where you have to do it all. I remember in 2011, I was writing service for the business. I was doing the work on the cars. I was cleaning the toilets. I was doing everything that this business did. I watched my parents do that for years and years and years with Mystery Hill. I really think, though, that if you can understand the fundamentals of business ownership, business operation, leadership, and developing a system, a strategy for your business, that's the key, because that's where you're going to find success. The other thing I'll tell you is get in networks where somebody runs a business that you're interested in. So if you want to start an automotive business, we've got a group called ASOG. We've got a group called Changing the Industry Podcast. Get in those groups and ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask the stupid question. They say there are no stupid questions. I've been on Facebook long enough to know at this point that's just not true. But I will tell you that if you will get in there and ask the stupid question, if you'll ask the question that you may not be comfortable to ask here locally, you will get answers, and it will help you develop that skill set that you need to be profitable. At the end of the day, the business has to be profitable. You will get into it and you will think, you know what? I just want to help people. It's great to help people. But if you don't have the money to help people, you're not going to help them long. You have to be profitable while you're doing it.
I lied. One last question for you.
Okay.
You've been driving to work in the same general vicinity for a long time now. Obviously, with your own business right next door to a family business. What does that mean to you, to be able to move down the road a little bit, but still being able to carry on some of that same ability to connect with people, to fill a need, satisfy curiosity? How has that changed your perspective over the years?
I tell people this all the time. I remember growing up, the number of people that would sit back and shake their head at me, right? I was a bit wild, and anybody listening to this in this community knows that beyond a shadow of a doubt. But they would sit back and shake their head at me, and to be part of a community now that comes in and says, "Hey, we're proud of you. You've done a really good job with this. You've done an amazing job with this business, man." That is so rewarding, and to be able to give back to those people who gave to me has been as rewarding as anything you could ever imagine. Some of our really great clients, Mike Shore, right around the corner here at J&M Produce, has been a family friend for years. And being able to work with him on a daily basis, fixing their vehicles, doing that kind of stuff for them, it is the most rewarding thing I could ever imagine. I tell a story about my dad all the time. My dad always used to give, 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 give. And we always got frustrated with him because he was always helping somebody. And like, "Dad, we could use that money for this, that, or the other." 3 months ago, I was in San Diego, California. This man walked up, he put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, "Your dad saved my life." And I said, huh? I think you got the wrong guy. I'm from North Carolina. He said, You're Wayne Underwood's son, right?" And I said, "Uh-oh, I am." And he said, "Yeah." He said, I was doing community service out there at Appalachian Heritage Museum. And he said, "Your dad gave me money for a plane ticket and literally the shirt off his back, sent me to California because he knew that I needed a new start. I needed a new direction." He said, "I came out here, started a family, started a business." And he said, he literally saved my life. And that is part of being in this community. I'm so honored to be here, and I'm so honored to be accepted by the business community here in Watauga County.
Well, you're doing an amazing job, and the perspective I think will really resonate with a lot of folks across multiple industries, and to hear that coming from here, I think speaks in a very powerful way. And certainly appreciate you spending some time with us.
Absolutely.
I know we'll cross paths again soon, but really thank you for the opportunity, and look forward to connecting folks with you.
Thank you so much, buddy. I really appreciate it, and y'all reach out anytime.